Welcome to Scrutiny and Improvement. Today there's the usual preamble about being recorded and our exits, etc. So I think we're all aware of those, so move slightly on. The minutes have been circulated. Is everybody happy with those? Yes? Look, your enthusiasm is powerful. So do I just sign these?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was one matter arising from the last minute, which was a question to Councillor James regarding the provision of secondary schools in Daventry. It came out of the strategic, it came out of the corporate plan. Councillor James did offer a response. I'm not sure whether I sent it round actually, I don't think I did. Councillor James's response is, it's a matter of fact that in Daventry there's currently a very large number of children secondary school age who are educated outside the town, and this has been the case for a number of years. I'm cutting this down a little bit. Whether the quality of the educational experience as compared with elsewhere is actual or perceived, or a mixture of both, it is arguable there has been a systemic and irredeemable failure to stem the reverse of this process, despite the changes that have been made in terms of the provision of new heads and the introduction of academies. Hence the need for radical action by securing a new secondary school with a fresh start to provide improvements in the pupils' educational experience and attainments. Such a development would fulfil a number of the Council's objectives in terms of the community strategy and of course sustainability. The Council's Conservative Group is committed to securing the provision of a new secondary school in Daventry, and that is his response.
I'd be grateful, Chair, if that could be circulated.
I will send
that.
I do apologise for that. I was just saying a few recent months my PCs, etc., have been a little bit problematic, to say the least.
Who actually makes a decision on that? Would it be the Secretary of State or would it be the local education authority?
I believe it's a combination, isn't it?
Yes, through you, Chairman. It actually needs a government announcement on funding, which there is some funding allocated for schools, but not necessarily for Daventry, so we're waiting for that announcement.
Well, the reason I asked was because, of course, they're just about to go through this whole exercise at Bolton in Rugby. There's two huge schools going up, well, one huge school and one not so huge. I don't think they open next year.
But that is the rationale behind the Council's decision to go for another school as a clean start to the Okay, so is that okay? I'll look at that. Next item, item 2, apologies for absence. We have a possible apology from Councillor Rupert Frost, who is hoping to be here a little bit later, depending on previous commitments and the timing thereof. The next item is, does anyone have any interest to declare pertaining to tonight's agenda? We're all clear on that, are we? Okay, we move right on to item number 4, which is the presentation by Councillor Warren. In fact, Councillor Warren come along this evening to, as Chairman of Licensing, to just give us a bit of a brief on that aspect of council life.
I don't know about brief. Thank you, Chair. I don't think I need to introduce myself as such, but one person I will introduce, which you probably don't know, and that's Ed Cook, is the Environmental Health Manager and our licensing guru, and has been since conception. I'll just give you a brief introduction to licensing for the authority. Prior to 2005...
Do you want to take questions at the end? Or
I can take questions as we go through. Okay. So that'll probably be easier. Yeah, so please feel free if you wish to ask any questions. Prior to 2005, all licensing activities was administered by the Magistrates Court. Government deemed it prudent at the time then to dissolve that through to local authorities. So all licensing within the local authorities had to be renewed in 2005. So you can imagine at that time it was rather busy for about 18 months, to say the least. Ed was here at inception, along with Andrea Hills, who's our current, still with us, current licensing officer, and myself. I think we're the only members from the original day of conception, so we've been at it a little while. So that's generally just a short introduction to licensing as we are from it. Now, our aim, the first slide, is to provide just an outline of the Licensing Act 2003. We do cover the Gambling Act 2005, taxi law, sex establishments and licensing, and street trading law. But the theme of what I'm going to be talking to you tonight about is basically liquor licensing, but the licensing laws that pertain to all, or the theme goes right the way through licensing as a whole. Next slide is everything we do evolves around the Human Rights Act, and the implications to licensing is peaceful enjoyment of possessions, the right for fair hearing, respect for the private and family life. It all hinges around proportionality. So everything, all the decisions we make, we have to have this in mind. The Licensing Act 2003, the licensing authority must carry out its functions with a view to promoting the licensing objectives. Now these objectives, now I'm sure you're all aware of Moses and the Ten Commandments, which he brought down from Mount Sinai. These four objectives are the Licensing Act's four commandments. That is, 1, the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm. And every decision we make within licensing evolves around those four objectives. And if they don't, then it is formed, and the decision could be illegal. The Licensing Committee, the Licensing Authority of the District of England. And this is a section that must be licensed committee consisting of minimum of 10, maximum of 15. All matters relating to the discharge of the licensed authority of its licensing functions are referred to its licensing committee, and the committee must discharge those functions on behalf of the authority. It can be signposted that the scheme of delegation can be delegated to the committee, the subcommittee, officer, powers, and also duties and its functions. Okay. Licensing authority of the committee. This is basically an administrative function, and it covers all licences. It's pretty straightforward. The licensing committee must establish one or more of the subcommittees consisting of 3 members, and the committees to which it may delegate its functions. Okay. Section 5 is carrying out the licensing functions to the licensing authority. It must have regard to its licensing statement. We have a current statement. It's reviewed every 5 years. The review has just been actually completed at the end of December, wasn't it? And the officers are at this moment reviewing the amount and the responses. So that will, once they've completed a review of those, it will be brought before strategy and council.
So when is it likely to become our policy? If it's just going through the stages of production, as it were.
It's going through a review. So I would suggest to you that there's very little changes within the policy. I think the review that we've had, or in the past, there's very little that needs. There may be some tweaks, but I would suggest to you that when it actually comes to strategy and council, there'll be hardly any changes to the current policy that we have. Okay. Dual licensing system. There are primarily two types of license: a personal license and a premises license. The personal license actually is for the owner or the senior manager within an establishment that requires a liquor license. The premises license is for the actual building, and that then you go into all the areas of whether it's required to, whether it's fit and proper, or it has a fit premises to sell the license or the liquor.
I suppose that's largely historical, one would imagine. I don't know new ones, obviously not, but I'm trying to think about an instance where it might be difficult to get one, maybe a community centre or something like that.
It really just depends on where it is, what it is, and the type of premises it is, and also what type of business it actually is. So is it just going to be a local pub, the drinking hole? Is it going to be a music festival, a music business? Is it just going to be very light entertainment? Everything has to be looked at and considered, but not only just the premises, but also where it is and the ramifications of that particular premises.
So do you give the licence to the premises? I mean, that's probably what this means. Do you give it to, say, the people that are, if it's a big building, for say, and you've got different people in that building, if one person applies to have a liquor licence in that building, does that mean the whole building then gets it, or just that floor?
Just that, whatever particular area he's asking for the liquor licence to pertain. So we could, if necessary, have this particular room licensed. Everywhere else, you would not be able to sell liquor or, drink it in the building, but you could in here. So it doesn't actually sort of mean that just because you ask for a licence, your licence, you're giving sort of carte blanche for the rest of the building.
Can I just ask?
Yes.
Sorry. So does a particular premises have to have a premises licence and someone with a personal licence?
Yes.
So there has to be two pertaining to that.
Yeah, and there is also another licence as well, which we'll come to as well, that is normally given out as well within the regime. Okay.
But that personal, the personal person is responsible for the premises, has to be responsible for the
Yes, he is. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You just covered my point in my starting remark.
Right.
One thing I would like to ask Mike, if I can, is that the business of revoking a premises licence. I'm thinking, if a pub that's been a pub for 100, 250 years suddenly becomes rowdy, would that be grounds for revoking its licence?
Not outright.
Would that be the personal licence
that will come under a premises licence. We will come to that later, but I will sort of just cover that. you would take all the evidence that is been put in front of you. If it's noise, then you would look to find out why that is. You certainly wouldn't revoke on a first basis unless it is a very severe case. So I would suggest to you that no, revocation is not done immediately. It's not done on the first line unless...
No, I was just thinking whether it was the premises licence then that would be affected.
Yes. Yeah.
Just to make sure I'm absolutely clear, the personal licence, a personal licence is attached to one particular premises.
No, the personal licence is an individual licence.
Yes, but can you hold a personal licence? It says it's an individual is only permitted to hold one personal licence.
Yeah.
Does that mean one personal licence that is related to one premise, or is it possible for that individual? Somebody. Suppose you have a pub that has got some sort of secondary entertainment place. Would that require two different personal licenses to cover it?
I think it's just the one licence, isn't it?
With a personal licence, you can be named as a designated supervisor on a number of premises licences, as long as you can demonstrate that you can control that premises and promote the licensing objectives.
Right.
Why does it specify you're only permitted to hold one personal licence if you can be at many places and hold one licence? Oh, is that the point in that? Okay, thank you.
And that designated person is the additional licence holder you referred to.
Yeah, I understand that.
Are we okay on that? Yeah. Okay, moving on. The licensable activities. The sale of retail of alcohol, the supply of alcohol on club premises, the provision of regulated entertainment, and the provision of late night refreshment. Just as simple as that. It's straightforward. Okay. The hearings. Typical applications by premises licence holders will be for a new licence, a variation of his current licence, or a variation of the conditions that were the mandatory conditions that are given on licences, and also if there was any additional conditions to that particular licence that was given. So they can all be altered by persons giving notice, also temporary event notices, if there is anybody that decides. Now, I believe it's now still only the police now. At one point, with a temporary event notice, nobody could object to a temporary event notice. But I understand now the police can.
The police and environmental health can.
It's environmental health.
With a temporary event notice.
Yeah. And any person can ask for a review as long as it's not frivolous or vexatious, and by any responsible authority.
I've never really understood what a temporary event notice is. I mean, does that just give them a licence? Does that give them a premises licence, effectively?
It's anybody that doesn't hold, well, literally anybody. So even if you don't hold a premises licence or a personal licence, you can apply for a temporary event notice to hold an event.
How long do they last for?
The event.
So you can...
Which can be, I think it's
96 hours.
Yeah.
It's in effect, councillor, it is like a premises licence, but very limited, very defined, and it's brought in through government deregulation. It was considered to be a light touch approach. They give us notice. We don't authorise it in any way. They give us notice. It's only the police and environmental health who've got the right to object to that notice, at which point if it's a regular temporary event notice, a hearing would be held.
Is there like a limit you can apply? Can you apply as many times in a year, or?
There are limits, and there's different limits for someone, for a member of the public to a personal licence holder. A personal licence holder can have quite a lot more than a member of the public.
Good evening, Councillor Ross.
Sorry. What time do you call this? Okay. Determination of an application. No relevant representations received, the licensing authority must grant the application. So if we've got nobody actually objecting to a licence that's been applied for, the authority must grant that licence. If there is an objection, again, as long as it's not frivolous or vexatious, then it will come before the subcommittee for a hearing.
Again, Mike, I'm thinking of thinking back now to when all this changed, went back in 2005 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And there were an awful lot of premises licences that were forgot to be applied for, I believe, such as a pub that had been in existence for 250 years. Didn't really see the necessity for this bureaucracy, I would guess.
Well, they all had licences prior to 2005.
Did they?
Yes, they did. But what they had, they all became, they all ceased to be valid, and then in 2005 they all had to be reapplied for.
Right.
And it was as if it was the very beginning. It was like a brand new application. It wasn't any sort of grandfather rights or anything like that given. It was a brand new application, which made it extremely difficult for the officers and us for the various hearings that we had to adhere to, because there was an awful lot of people objecting and they realised what was being asked for, because an awful lot of pubs suddenly looked at what they were being asked to apply for, suddenly thought we'll ask for everything. And this is what they did, which is probably the best way to do it, to be perfectly honest with you, because it saves coming back having to have reviews and changes made to the licence as you're going along. So you might as well ask for as much as you can get, and that way life goes on. Okay. Well, during a hearing, the licence authority must take such steps as to consider the appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives. And they include grant the licence subject to conditions, exclude from the scope of the licence any licensable activities to which the application relates, exclude, refuse to specify a person from the licence as the premises supervisor, or reject the application.
So just to be clear,
Yeah.
refuse to specify a person in the licence as the premises supervisor.
If he's not considered to be a fit and proper
So that
person.
basically means that the premises at that point doesn't get a licence, does not have a licence then, if they're not.
That's correct. Yeah. Again, we go through our 4 commandments, our 4 licensing objectives.
And again, the conditions have to work along those lines as well.
Yes, yeah. There's obviously mandatory conditions that are already set, and they cannot be duplicated in any way. And there can be, as I say, additional conditions.
So on time of opening, closing?
Yeah, that's all comes into it. And that can be a discussion when the applicant actually puts the application in, and discussions are ongoing via the licensing officer. And you can mitigate an awful lot of problems at that stage and discuss, various scenarios. So, there's a great deal that can be done before it ever gets anywhere near a hearing. Determination of an application. The authority determination should be evidence-based, justified by being appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives.
Yes, just asking, how do we get an evidence base on something that's coming in as a new application?
Invariably, if you're saying to new,
Well, just for instance, Mr. So-and-so wants to open up a new pub up in Daventry High Street.
right, okay, it's a brand new application,
Yeah.
and somebody's objected.
Yeah.
Um,
Saying that it's going to be too much traffic, too much noise, drunks in the street.
yeah,
But how would somebody know to object? I mean, is there a system? You know, if you're planning to put up a new building, notice will be put up so that people are aware that this has been planned and that there is something to object to. To what extent does this system work?
the applicant has to advertise exactly what he's going to do, and he does that. I think it's still a blue background.
There's a blue notice has to be posted on the property, but there's also the
It has to be
advertising in local press.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
It also goes to parish councils, doesn't it?
It can be if that's in this
Well,
community.
also the local parish council, environmental health, police, and PHO are all informed of new applications, and they have a copy of the application, so they can go through it. If there's any objections, they will make. If they've got no comments, then it's fine. But your point is, it's noted outside the premises and the immediate area of where the location is.
That's sort of my question around evidence base, because I've seen them come through to parish councils and we have people coming on and object and say, we should be standing up against this, we don't want it. And the question was, well, what's the evidence? And invariably, well, they can't be, can they?
Well, no, an awful lot of the objections that we get that come before us are what I call what ifs.
Yeah.
And you can't adjudicate on that. You know, you can only do that if something's actually happened. So therefore, you give the licence, but then you put a caveat in and just sort of make a note. So if these objections...
So for instance, just as a for instance, if there was an establishment 2 doors down from another establishment and there was drunken disorderly behaviour in the existing establishment, would that be evidence that it would happen in the new one?
well, if there was an altercation out on the street, police would have been involved, so we would have evidence taken from police and statements
But would
made.
that pertain to the new, would that pertain?
That could be taken into consideration. It just depends on the circumstances. There's not a...
No, understand the other side.
It's just extremely, you know, it's an extremely moving question. Okay. Determination of, where are we? We've done that, haven't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay, conditions. Sort of half covered this already. Conditions are, there's mandatory conditions which are part of the policy, but there are also then conditions that can be added to the application. Now these can be voluntary by the applicant, they can be negotiated by the licensing officer and the applicant together. These also can be conditions that have been asked for by the EHO or the police. But again, they can be negotiated with the applicant prior to the hearing, so therefore sometimes it can be all mitigated so we don't actually have to have a hearing. All the conditions and that can be sorted beforehand. Sometimes not, therefore we end up in a hearing and then we have to adjudicate on those conditions. Now also, the subcommittee can impose its own conditions as well. So, yes?
To what extent then do we have discretion in deciding what conditions we want to put? Yeah, I'm thinking of the comparison with planning law, where you might agree an application with a whole set of conditions, that these conditions have got to in some way be compatible with planning policy.
Can I just check? Planning and licensing are totally different.
I know, but
They're totally separate. They cannot be brought together. They cannot be. There's no crossover.
I'm not suggesting that there is or that there should be, but just by analogy, is there anything within licensing that if you came up with a condition that trouser widths must be whatever it might be, would the applicant have a basis for going back and appealing on the grounds that that does not fit with some sort of policy that exists somewhere, or do you have sort of complete discretion in deciding what conditions you would apply?
We have complete discretion within the 4 elements of our objectives.
But okay.
Now, we can only adjudicate on licensing aspects. Now, whether a premises has got planning permission to hold events is nothing to do with us. That is a planning issue. I could grant a license to an applicant on the conditions, on what is put in front of us. So we can license that particular premises, but under planning law, that could probably will not be able to happen until planning has given consent to that. So planning would then have to look at the feasibility and the possibility of that being proportioned and valued as a premises to hold those types of events. Now, it may be that under planning law and policy, they consider that not. So they don't allow that. That means that the liquor license cannot go forward. But it can still be issued, but he can't go forward because planning law supersedes, trumps licensing, shall we say.
And vice versa, of course.
I think not really. I don't think it does. I think planning trumps licensing, doesn't it?
No, if you've got planning and then you refuse to give it a license, then they will still be prevented from doing the activity.
Yeah.
I think what we're trying to get at here is that
A double
can
whammy.
you come up as a licensing authority with any limitation or restrictions? I mean, something really frivolous. I mean, something saying it's frivolous is sort of says it's not. But for instance, you could say, yes, you can have a drinking venue, but there's a dress code of jackets and jackets and trousers, and ladies must wear a hat. I mean, can it be as ridiculous as that if there's a good reason for it?
Not really.
That would be great.
It's got to be considered proportionate.
But it's to demonstrate that you can come up with anything that's particular to that location, that town.
It could be.
I mean, I know that's a little bit silly, but you see what I'm saying. I mean, there's no sort of parameters or set of rules
Can I?
Yeah.
When someone makes an application, as part of the application for a premises licence, you have to fill in what's called an operating schedule. That's them saying, these are the conditions I want put on the premises licence because this is how I'm actually going to promote the licensing objectives. They've got to promote the licensing objectives. They will relate to one of the licensing activities. So whatever the applicant puts in the operating schedule will be transposed into the licence. This is in addition to the mandatory conditions. If it comes to a hearing, then the councillors will be given guidance by the advocate to make sure it complies with the legislation. The guidance, we've got Section 182 guidance, which is quite specific in how the licensing objectives will be promoted. And we've also got the council's own policy statement, which is subject to review. So there's plenty of guidance to give to make the council safe Because what we don't want to be doing is putting conditions on there that's going to make the council vulnerable, i.e. if it goes to appeal, then they've got absolutely every right to take it to the magistrates court and then Crown Court, that would fail. Does that help?
So if they say to you, we want to be open till 6 a.m. in the morning, can you then say, we'll only give you a licence if you are open till 5 a.m?
If the evidence base it suggests that, if for example, if one of the statutory bodies, like that may well be environmental health, saying after this time, we think as professionals that is unacceptable, and then councillors would be mindful of that professional advice, and it's then entirely appropriate to put that condition, to that restriction on the licence.
Can you change it, say, during the length of the licence, say evidence has come in that if it is open past 5 o'clock in the morning that it's getting loud, can you then bring the licence back and change the times that they're allowed it?
The representation, objection, could be put by any person at any time on the duration of that licence. Bearing in mind the licence is, once it's issued, it's there in perpetuity until it's surrendered by the applicant or the licence holder, or actually revoked by the council. So at any point in that time in the future, it can be amended.
And then this is also where, when you're saying what is scenarios on an application, we always put make a comment towards the end of the licensing hearing to the general public or the majority of the people that are making against that if it does become a nuisance, you have the ability to bring it back in front of us for review. And then, exactly, and therefore we can then move, if there is a serious problem, we can do something about it. But that's basically the system. A breach of the conditions give rise to criminal liability, so must be framed so as to give position and definition to the prescribed act. Okay. Deliberating and making the decision. The subcommittee can deliberate in public, we can do that on the bench if necessary, or we can do that, which we do 9 times out of 10 in private. We retire and we have our legal advice with us and we discuss, and the decision must not be unreasonable in what is called Wednesbury terms, which is case law, and it comes from the Associated Provincial Picture House versus Wednesbury Corporation, 1948. And it must not be bizarre or irrational, must take into account all relevant factors, and must take into account any irrelevant factors. Reasons must be given, not for refusals, but also for grants, revocations and suspensions. Notification of the decision in writing must be accompanied by writing with the right to appeal. The reasons should make reference to the evidence heard, should state if any evidence has been disregarded and why, what licensing objections have been considered, reference to the legislation, guidance and the policies. The guidance requires the local authority to give reasons for the decision. The legislation requires the local authority to also have regard to the guidance. Reasons for the decision, not just a minute, but what has been heard and said. The decision is typed up and presented as soon as possible after the decision is made. Application for review of premises licence. I think we've more or less already covered this. You know, it can be made by any person, so I think I don't think there's anything on there that we haven't really already covered, to be honest. So we'll skip that one. Applicant may appeal. The applicant can appeal basically any decision that we make, and that can be made within 21 days of notification of the decision. As I say, we try to do it actually on the day of the hearing, and before the applicant actually leaves this room, they have a signed copy of the decision, and therefore they have 21 days from that date to make an appeal, and that appeal will be to the magistrates' court. I don't think we may have lost one. I think you can count perhaps on 2 fingers probably the number of appeals that we've actually lost since 2005. So our decision making has been extremely sound.
They have how long to appeal it? Sorry, 20...
Sorry?
Did you say they have 21 days?
21 days.
21 days and 21 working days to appeal it?
I'm not sure that it is 21 days. I think it's just 21 days.
It's not 20 days, it's not working days.
Yeah, it's not working days.
3 weeks.
Yes.
How on earth is a magistrate's court going to have all the people involved have any idea about the efficacy of an appeal case? They can't possibly, unless you know the specific. I can understand how if you've got a planning appeal, a planning inspector knows quite a lot about planning, so it's well qualified to administer that process. But the guys that sit in the matters order, they're not going to know anything about pubs and things, are they?
Can I give that one to it?
Absolutely, please feel free. Yeah, they might be guided by a qualified clerk on the day, although the lay people sat on the bench, they'll be guided by the person in front of them. But I take your point entirely. It's still not. They still won't have the knowledge that we have, or our advocate who's acting on our behalf would have either. So it's just they hear the arguments and make a decision simply based on what they hear.
Are those criminal matters, or are they civil matters? Civil matters.
I mean, I'm trying to get some sort of sense of perspective. I mean, what we've heard so far is what happens, or should happen. I think it's identical to a member's briefing that was given a couple of years ago.
Sorry?
The slides might be exactly the same, but what has been described is essentially what was given in a member's briefing. What I'm concerned with is what it is. Do we simply conclude that there's a job to be done and it's really so effectively bureaucratic and mundane that it simply goes on? Or is there something that this committee should be concerned about whether things could be done differently and could be done better? Are there problems that we don't know about? It would be useful if we knew, for example, how many applications are made in a year, how many are refused, how many go to an appeal to magistrates' court, so we get sort of some sense of whether this is a problem area for DDC or whether it's all going perfectly smoothly, that Councillor Warren has got everything under control and there's nothing more we need to worry about.
I would say to you, we haven't got anything to worry about. It's the controls and the constraints that we have to deal within are very, very rigorous and...
It's very prescriptive, in other words.
Yes.
The law says what we've got to do.
Yes, yeah. There is no wriggle room, and everything we do is covered by legislation.
How many applications a year do you deal with?
I can get those statistics. I haven't got them to hand, unfortunately, Councillor, but I can certainly get them to you. Absolutely no problem.
I mean, is it 10? Is it 100?
No, it depends on the type of application. Temporary event notices we get around about 400 or 500 a year. But in personal licences we can get it's 1 or 2 a month. Premises licence is something similar. It's not massive numbers. Taxi drivers, that's another story, but you're going on to the licensing outside of things. I'm satisfied as the manager of the service that we've got safeguards in place to protect the council at all levels.
It's fair to say, isn't it, that if it's not surprising that you never lose appeals. Because if you're the clerk that you just explained at the Manchester School. With it's fair to say, a tenth, if that, of the knowledge of you guys. He'd be a brave clerk to, and a very sort of arrogant clerk to think you know otherwise, and to sort of overrule. In practice, they're always going to be always going to defer to your superior knowledge. So, and put another way, anybody who goes to Peel is completely crazy. I mean, that's when the right ballpark comes. I mean, it's a strange system.
Another thing through the chair, you're dead right. We do have a good knowledge of it for sure. But the applicant will invariably have a licensing solicitor who's their advocate, and they'll put up a good argument as well. So for that reason, it is something that we need good control on.
Okay.
I think if I could just mention that, of course, we have what's called the adversarial system of justice in this country, which means it's one person's argument against another. And basically that means that if a good argument comes forward from the solicitor, he might win the day, and vice versa.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to legal. Case law. The role of the council's legal officer during hearings, which is very self-explanatory. On the bench with us, we have a legal licensing solicitor, and we call on him at all times for advice concerning the licensing, and also the other help we have is always Andrea, our licensing officer. As I said earlier at the outset, she's been with us since 2005 with this, so she lives and breathes it basically. She's dealing with it every day, extremely knowledgeable. Yes?
I mean, can I then ask about the way it operates? On what percentage of cases do you disagree with the advice from your legal officer?
Very rarely.
What does that mean?
Very rarely. In fact, I don't think there is a time when I have, to be perfectly honest. We've taken his advice, we've considered it, and we've considered it within the four licensing objectives as to whether it is proportionate and reasonable, and we as a committee take that forward. But we will always take the advice of the legal officer, and I would say, you know, I can't think of actually a time when I've gone against his advice.
Yeah.
Now, it may be through discussions that we've gone round and taken a different view, but we've all come back to a collective view of one of which the legal officer has always been very happy with. That's basically the licensing in general. The other areas that we do cover, and I'm not really going to go into, is the Gambling Act 2005, and this is our policy statement, which you'll find on the website that we have. And it covers the control of gambling, including betting, casinos, gambling machines, lotteries. The objectives are to prevent crime, ensure fairness and openness, and to protect children and vulnerable persons. It's led centrally by the Gaming Commission. So we're told, and we have our policies, and the controls include the operating licences, personal licences, which are issued by the Gaming Commission, premises licence, which are again issued by us, which is the local authority. Temporary event uses, notices, occasion uses received by the local authority, broadly similar to the Licensing Act 2003.
Can I ask a question there? I was wondering how this affects pubs again, because most pubs have got some light form of gambling attached to them.
Machines?
The machines, card games for instance, all that sort of thing, which are usually pretty low level activities. far as pubs concerned. But do they require additional licensing for that, or is it all part and parcel of?
Yeah, for the machines, they have a separate gaming licence, which is an annual licence. As far as gaming, I think I ran a pub for 10 years. I don't think we had any, we didn't allow, or we weren't allowed to have any card games.
Really not?
No.
I thought they were allowed under certain rules of amounts and things like that. So I think you said something about mine used to be long ago.
Yeah.
They were allowed card games for minor amounts. In other words, pennies. I don't know what the rule is.
You're right, Councillor. There's strict guidance. There are some exceptions, as with any legislation. But going back to the machine side of things, a premises licence for pub can have up to 2 AWPs, amusement prizes, on the premises licence. If you want any more than that, there's a separate additional licence. Yeah. But in terms of the Gambling Act side of things, we have very little involvement, never mind issues with gambling side of things. We've got betting shops, that's about as challenging as it gets for sure. Know that they were challenging with the faulties, the ones where you can the fixed odds betting terminals, that is, where they can lose a lot of money in such a long time, but in a quick time rather, but they've just undergone closer control by the government as well, so time down on that. But the Gambling Commission are absolute key players on the gambling side of things.
Yes.
Very supportive of what we do.
So does that mean effectively that games of dominoes for minor amounts and card games for minor amounts in pubs is permissible?
I would suggest that would be permissible. Yeah, like I said, there's guidance on it with the specifics.
Okay. Adopted legislation. All the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions of 76 Act, Local Government Miscellaneous Act of 1982, all these have been adopted by the District Council. So they are all covered there. Hackney Carriage and Private Hire, that's extremely dated. The Town and Police Clause of 1847 Act, and widespread inconsistencies of policies, conditions, procedures is endemic across the county. So we've got a problem when it comes to the unitary. We have different policies on private hire and taxis within Daventry, the borough and South Northants. So I think...
which one gets adopted then?
We don't know. Not one policy will get adopted. It will be a harmonisation of those policies, and that's going to be a very difficult conversation, I would suggest.
The Town and Police Clauses.
These are all captured by the Local Government Review work streams. Ian Vincent is the Senior Responsible Officer for Regulatory Services. Licensing is one of those topic areas, so officers, managers are working through the implications of that for sure, but harmonising policy is going to be a real challenge because of what Councillor Warren's just outlined, but it will get achieved.
Yeah. Can you give us some examples then of what are the issues, what are the decisions that need to be taken?
I can't really give any, specifics, to be honest. But generally, the
our taxis have to be in Daventry have to be white or silver, don't they? For instance, they have to be no more than 4 years old and things like that. As far as I know.
Quite specific conditions.
But in what respects do they differ from Northampton's conditions and South Northampton?
Northampton are bringing in hybrid electrification cars, I believe, by the end of, I think it's maybe by the end of this year. All vehicles under the age of 2016 will not be eligible because I think the emissions will not
cover, and they need to be hybrid or some form of electricity. So there's going to be an awful lot of, I would suggest, taxis and private hires coming off the road. Mind you, if it's a hybrid, irrespective of age, it will be covered. South Northants, Daventry may have a slightly different look at that, but you know, there's huge differences right across.
Can I ask then? Here's an area of licensing policy where there is an amount of discretion that the councils have. How did Daventry arrive at these policies? I mean, presumably it came to a point at which something was put in front of a council meeting amongst a mass of other papers, and it was nodded through. But where did the debate take place? What were the options that were put to members? I mean, how did it happen that we've got one policy and that has another problem?
No, I get where you're coming from. It's evolved differently.
That's it in a nutshell. I'd love to find, it'd be intriguing, wouldn't it, to find out where this all started. They started back in 1847 with horses and bales and getting people around. This is a very, very old industry, but it's actually evolved.
A decision on hybrid vehicles then started in 1847.
That's right.
Why did Northampton see that as something to do, and not Daventry?
Because of the element of discretion and different different varieties and how it's evolved over time, for sure. We got very strict requirements for our taxis in Daventry, which we're quite proud of. Whether they're right for the borough, whether they're right for South Northants, time will tell. But what will happen is, because of the complexity of this and the diversity of it, what will most likely happen is this will go through the new regime on a zoning basis. That is legal. This is the government and their different departments like the Law Commission and the Department of Transport have tried to synchronise these policies and procedures over the whole country numerous times and failed. But we've got to be in a position with the new regime to have some element of consistency at some point in the future.
Can I just point out, as chair of this committee, where the decisions come from? They can emanate from this committee, for instance, couldn't they? There's a suggestion going forward in the licensing procedure, if we were to have looked at it and said, and the other place that decisions come from in this council are from councillors. It's up to us as councillors to make the policy, to either to suggest it, make it, and agree with it or disagree with it. That's as simple as that, isn't it?
Licences are granted with conditions attached that reflect the policy, originally adopted by Daventry in the 1980s, underwent fundamental review in May 2015. Okay. Sex establishments. We haven't really got any.
We've adopted the legislation when it came in, but it's not something that we actually have got any active licences at the moment.
No. So, street trading. Governed by Section 3 of the Schedule 4 of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act, provides control of trading through prohibited streets, licensed streets, which is not applicable to the DDC, and the consent streets, which is the whole of the district, with exceptions. But street trading is pretty straightforward.
That doesn't include markets.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't include.
That's still going by the charter, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
That's all checked.
And generally, operation guidance on licensing for the public and business can be found on the council's website. The agenda for most recent committee meetings can also be found on the council website. Any other questions otherwise? That's it.
Very interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. It was,
Sorry it's taken just a bit long.
no, I think it was, there was quite a lot of questions, wasn't there? So,
It's surprising. It's a big subject, and I think an awful lot of people forget just how complex it actually is.
yeah, just one question, just one more question for you. Do you get involved with enforcement?
No. No. In what means, but what do you mean by enforcement?
You don't instigate anything?
No.
It's only when things are brought to you as evidence?
Yeah, we have to be kept completely separate from that because we can't be considered to be
Policemen.
yeah, but we've also got to be seen to be not controlled or influenced by events. We have to be completely independent.
Also, just the next one. Licensing obviously generates a certain amount of revenue, so licensing is charged. On a personal and a premises license, once it's given, is that given or does it have to be annually paid for and renewed?
The personal licence is one-off. The premises licence, like I said, it lasts in perpetuity, but that does go with an annual renewal fee.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, one more question. Sorry, no, I just mentioned that. If you were to lose your personal licence and then you can reapply for it and you are given it because circumstances have changed, do you then have to repay for your personal licence? Okay.
When we were originally, because I actually hold a personal licence, and when I applied for mine it was for 10 years. But during that 10 years the regime changed. It's now it's a life issue. It's only valid as long as the information that the authority holds on me is correct. If it's not, then it's deemed invalid.
For instance, if you've got criminal convictions.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
I can be excused now, Chair.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for your time. Okay, councillors, we move on to item 5, which is the Ride and Work programme. Updates and presentations from members on the following task plans. First one is assignment 27, which is the voluntary services support piece of work, which Councillor Frost took over, or was taking over, from Councillor Brown.
I've got nothing to update, unfortunately. Councillor Brown and I haven't had a chance to meet up on this, so there's nothing to report.
Can we commit to having something for the next meeting, Councillor Frost, on that one? Good. Along with hopefully a date for completion, an estimated date for completion.
Sure.
So we can put it in place. I understand you've been working on the other piece with Councillor Ritchie, and obviously that's been quite a large section of work. And that brings us on to assignment 31, which is Councillor Ritchie's assignment, ably assisted by yourself, Councillor Frost, and others.
You have the report,
We do indeed.
which of course I'll assume has been read and studied. When we took, at least when I took this up, I was aware it was going to be a big job, and I think we was all, felt that this was going to be a fairly big bit of work. It's not as big as it seems. There's a blank page in it.
trickiness in it.
But I think we felt that this is one of these issues that was going to take a little bit of time. I think as a task panel, we worked well at it. We were pretty, I think, cross-party. We worked across the whole period of a general election in which parties were trying to outbid each other in what they were going to do for the environment. I don't think we mentioned the general election at all during these actual discussions. It's just a pity that the party that was putting in the smallest bit then went ahead and won. However, look, it's a big report, but in it, there is nothing that we recommend that is not being done somewhere else or in many other places by many other local authorities. I would like to think that Daventry was going to be, in some respects, pioneering, and I think it can be pioneering. But we are already in a position where more than half of the local authorities in England have now adopted, a statement saying that there is a climate emergency. They have done that, and in each case, in doing so, they have put against their declaration what their targets are. And these targets, superficially, always seem to be much the same. Either, we will achieve this by 2025 or 2030 or 2040, whatever it might be. When you're looking actually at the detail, they're actually very different. And we didn't approach this from the approach of setting a target, saying, look, this is how what we'll need to do to reach that target. Section 2 of our report, in which we talk about the scope for emissions reductions, when that was originally drafted, that was going to be about targets. But we get to a situation where, needing to recognise that the big changes that need to be made are changes that it needs government doing. There are loads of things that are outside our control, and therefore there didn't seem to be much point in setting the district council a target where the means of getting there was outside its control. It couldn't do anything about it. An obvious case is, if we take emissions from the M1, as it goes through Daventry district. Daventry district is, as it were, charged for the emissions that take place on our bit of the M1, but there is absolutely nothing that we can do about it. So it doesn't seem sensible. It is sensible to restrict our targets, the things where that we can control, that we can actually do. That, of course, focuses things down very much onto the emissions from the district council, from this building, other buildings that the district council owns, things that the district council does, the whole Norse operation, things like that. And we have there made recommendations. I sometimes worry that we haven't made sufficiently ambitious recommendations, but I'll return to that in a moment. And I think that it is important that we, as a district, if we are going to be saying, as a district council, if we're going to say to people across the district, you have got to take steps to reduce your emissions, it'll sound fairly hollow if we as the district council are not leading the way in what we are actually doing. So what the district council does with its own emissions from that point of view is actually quite important. The district council's emissions are about 1/500th of the total emissions of the district. A lot of our thinking has therefore been about how do we actually influence what goes on across the district. And although we have got many many separate recommendations, when you break them down, I calculated that 29 recommendations were about policy. But 22, to do with communications. How we sort of structure policy so that we require others to act in a way that reduces greenhouse gas emissions. Communications, how we persuade others to do it. I don't know if any of you heard that a few days ago when Glasgow made its big announcement. Glasgow has claimed that it can reduce the emissions of the whole of Glasgow to net zero by 2030. I admire them for the declaration. I can't actually see how it is going to be possible for them. But if they want to try it, we've looked at them. And in the discussion, they interviewed the guy who's the chief executive director of the Committee on Climate Change, the very influential government advisory group that has been set up. And his big focus was, well, the thing that we need to do is to engage people, because they are not going to deliver sufficient reductions in emissions to meet targets unless people are with them. You don't get, you always have the sort of Donald Trumps of this world. But by and large, that unless we can convince our residents that climate change is actually something that is important and that there are things that they can do about it, you can feel good if you're doing something to save your planet. You may also feel good about it because it's probably better for your health and it saves you money. But these are the things that you've got to engage with, which is why quite a number of our recommendations are about communications. Now, I'm not suggesting that because they're about communications that they don't have costs, but we're not talking about about massive costs in this case. A leaflet to distribute. Some of the communication recommendations are to write a letter, go and talk to people. So a lot of these recommendations are things that are important. They're important that we agree to do them, but they're not going to be hugely expensive. Of course, they may lead to something else. In terms of the cost of the things that we do recommend, that go a little bit further. We have proposed that if we're going to pull this together as a whole program, there has got to be somebody within this building, or wherever this building might go to, after reorganisation, there's got to be somebody there that is managing the process and driving it forwards. And I mean, we're grateful for a lot of comments that we got that are coming from Tony and his colleagues, and suggested that perhaps this is one that officers are wary of. But I would be concerned whether we're talking about somebody who's appointed internally or externally, or how the thing is put together. But I do feel that there needs to be somebody at the centre that moves this forward. The other thing in which there are immediate costs, we've argued with looking at the buildings that we either own, like this one here, or in which we sort of own but operate more indirectly, like the leisure centre, or buildings that we own and would simply let out as commercial renting. In these buildings, we need to see what we can do as the own buildings to reduce emissions. We as a task panel are not the experts that can tell you what to do in that, but we need to re-argue, get in a consultant to actually look at it building by building and come up with recommendations. Of course, consultants cost money, and there's no point taking on a consultant unless you're at least willing to consider going ahead with whatever recommendations we might make. So yes, there are some things that are in our package that will have money that needs to be spent. Just a week or 10 days before Christmas, Oxford City Council passed a motion that committed another £19 million to their climate change work. And that's on top of about 80 million that was spent over the years. Glasgow's talking about spending a small fortune on what it is going to do. By comparison, I say that I'm slightly worried that we have perhaps been lacking in ambition to push for some of the older initiatives. Glasgow is a place with a particular challenge. We've got bold initiatives too from places like Bristol, and if they feel that they can do it at the level of dealing with an entire city, then I'm not arguing that we necessarily didn't go far enough, but I would certainly reject any notion that we moved ahead of ourselves. So these are, the recommendations. There are a lot of recommendations. It's been put as, should we have listed them in order of, a priority. I would actually find that very difficult to do. I've already had criticisms of the report. The report's now, of course, public and that it's on the website. I'm told it doesn't give enough prominence to planting wildflowers. Well, planting wildflowers is very important.
It's impossible. They're no longer wild.
Sorry, I think there are definitions I went in. Anyway, I feel that if we're talking about how many tons of carbon dioxide we can take out of the atmosphere, then planting flowers is not going to be a big winner. What we do to the buildings that the district council owns will offer a much easier calculation of what we're actually achieving. But if we get back to this argument that what ultimately is going to achieve the goal is convincing our population that this is an important endeavour and that they have got to be part of it, then planting flowers becomes much more than just what these flowers are going to achieve for biodiversity and for bees and so on, and that these things become important. We know, I think halfway there are 60 pages, there are practically as many recommendations. But you can't make progress in all these recommendations at once. We recognise that where there is money that has got to be spent, consultants and so on, then the issue needs to actually put back to officers to prepare a proposal to be brought back. In most cases we've said to the following council meeting rather than the February one, the council meeting in May. We don't have many council meetings left here in Daventry, and therefore we have got to move quickly. But we also know that the hugely complicating factor in all of this. Other councils said that they are going to try to get to net zero or somewhere near it by 2030 or 2040. Well, by the time it comes to 2022, we don't exist. And we therefore need to think, how do we make sure that all this continues? We're talking about a climate emergency. Therefore, it would not be acceptable to simply say we're going to, there is going to be this major organisational change, and therefore we don't regard it as an emergency. It's somebody else's problem because we're all going to retire and put our feet up. We've got to start things, but it also means that we've got to look for a way of carrying that forwards. And I think that what has been very, very encouraging The South Northants have a working group on climate emergency, and Robert and I have attended certainly the recent meetings with a view to trying to, we're not going to produce the same reports, they're going to do things differently. We have talked with a guy in Northampton Borough Council, and they will have their way of carrying it forwards. But we need to very quickly try to find a mechanism whereby the existing councils can ensure that this is put very, very firmly onto the agenda of not just of the West Northants Council when it eventually comes along, but that in putting together a programme of work that after next May, the new unitary is actually putting this together and actually thinking about this and as to what the overall approach should be across Northamptonshire.
Thank you, Councillor Richard. Has anyone else got any comments on the report?
I don't think I've got any comments on the report per se, because I think it's a very good report. But I take exception to the terminology used, a climate emergency. Everybody knows what that means, don't they? What it means is, effectively, have we missed the next ice age due to human activity? Now, of course we all know that ice ages are actually controlled by the Milankovitch cycles, don't they? No, they don't, do they? Nobody knows what the Milankovitch cycles are. Well, I do. And I'm afraid that nobody knows the answer to this question. And if we did know the answer, and the answer was yes, we're going to miss the next ice age because of human activity, there is nothing we can do about it. That's it. Sorry.
I'm not even going to bother to respond to
that's
that,
fine.
because it is simply such a denial of everything that the scientific community have been telling us for a long time. It's a denial of the evidence of bushfires, of floods in the Philippines. We're looking at many parts of Africa where there are droughts that are causing famines and everything else. We've seen in this country many more episodes of extreme weather. We've had floods in Doncaster. We have had farmers losing crops because of the lack of rains and so on. So, that is where we are. These are things that have been predicted by those working on climate change over recent years, and we see that it's actually happening. We see that things are changing that are not easily reversible. The ice caps melting, not just increasing sea levels that can be very damaging for many communities, including many communities around the coast of Britain. By the ice cap melting, there is not such a large ice cap to reflect rays back into space. It accelerates the warming. The melting of the ice releases a lot of methane from the soils below. It increases the effect. Well, that is the situation that we're in.
Councillor Richard, I understand exactly what you're saying, and I think the general consensus across the country and even our government is that there is an element of climate change. There is climate change happening in the world, and that is our best knowledge at the moment. So I think that is irrefutable, even though it could go. Anything could happen at any time, and etc. But you have to work on what you're working with. It might be. Councillor.
Can I just a question that born out of experience, if you like, of this group and how it works. So when you go to a report like this, I'm not saying the procedure is this meeting decides whether to adopt it, and if so, it gets passed to the strategy group. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's decided tonight.
If it goes forward what goes forward to the strategy group is decided tonight. Be that all of the recommendations, some of the recommendations, or none of the recommendations.
Does it work? Does it? I'm about to find out. I suspect. But is it like a planning committee thing where someone makes a proposal and someone seconds it and that kind of level?
That is pretty much it. Yes.
Okay. I mean, because it is like, it's a big report and it's bound to have some controversial elements, but yeah, I mean, obviously, you expect me to be biased. I think it should be to put forward. Does that mean that I can propose it? Or
Yes, absolutely.
well, can I do that? Can I propose that it gets adopted?
You propose that the report goes forward to strategy as presented by the working group.
Well, that's second.
I mean,
Second, nobody else for
If you vote against it, it's damn it, Tom.
My perspective on this as a chair of this committee is it's a difficult one because I think it is so expansive and so large and it's got huge ramifications for the council. There's officer work has got to go into this, and of course we are in the transition of councils, aren't we? We're in a very, very difficult position here across the board in this council, in almost anything we do. And then in front of us here, what we're actually putting in, what we're actually asking the strategy group to take forward to full council is a large lump of work, even if it was just to look at each one of these recommendations and give them half an hour, it's still quite a lot of work. So I understand that. When I first read it, and I sort of did have a preamble on this with Tony when we just putting the agenda together, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, how on earth is this going to happen? I'm actually quite pleased with the way that it's come through as well, because I do think it's coherent and sensible. I think we could spend an awful lot of hours in this committee looking at the wording of each individual recommendation to go forward and change some of the grammar in it and maybe change some of the emphasis on it, etc., etc. And my view is I'm not sure whether that's worthwhile at this point. I'm more of the opinion that this is a decision for the whole of the council to make, and you as the authors of this report, the facilitators of the thought processes along those lines. So there are huge ramifications in it. And yes, this council is changing, it won't be in existence, but there has to be a mechanism for taking this council's thoughts through into the new unitary authority, and I think that's probably the most important point in this is having some sort of champion in that. I'm right in thinking on this that Ian Vincent looks after environmental issues does he look after environmental issues on the new shadow? I mean, Ian Vincent.
Sorry, just sort of clarify that, Chairman. Ian Vincent is the senior responsible officer for the regulatory part of the council, so his responsibility is conducting the effort in bringing services together, and will report through to the shadow authority in due course.
I mean, that's some sort of conduit, and that's the sort of level I think that this needs to be living at to go forward to become a living document to be considered as part of the whole. That would be my view. But
Just Chair, as you'll know, I think you'll know, we have considered the idea of doing a briefing on the report in advance of the council meeting. We've actually suggested that a suitable time might be 5 to 6 on the day of the strategy group meeting, which is 9th of February comes to mind, but whatever the strategy group meeting is suggested then. Because after all, there's going to need to go to the strategy group, and if we're thinking of a briefing for council members, then that would seem the sensible time to go for. Clearly, not every member of the council is going to come to go to the strategy group meeting, and even those who do go to the strategy group meeting will not necessarily come to a briefing. We felt there would be some opportunity for the questions that people want to ask to be discussed, rather than taking a huge chunk out of the time for the council meeting. give people a chance to think about it beforehand. And of course, I put it that, that we as the authors of the report, need to be there and to be ready to, to respond to it. Can I just say, I think I should have said in the introduction too. One reason that the report is relatively full in terms of words and descriptions, rather than focusing on recommendations, is a view that the report itself ought to be something for, and indeed feedback, to many of the people who actually sent in ideas and who contact us during the course of the task panel's work. That there ought to a report that comes out of it. Now, at the moment, the report is full of what we recommend. Once it has come through the council, assuming that it survives the council, which of course we're optimistic about, at that stage, a proposal is the report should be appropriately reworded to reflect that it is, it's a statement of policy and of intent, rather than recommendations that are going to be considered. It can be at that stage made to look a little bit more beautiful with appropriate, photographs and things to make it into a more readable document. And the report itself can at that stage be a start to getting more parish councils or schools or other groups to start thinking about climate change, which is part of the reason that it's 60 pages rather than 40.
So what are you suggesting another recommendation then, Councillor?
That recommendation is actually within the report.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, I said for me, I always see, you sort of have to see this as a living, breathing document, don't you, going forward as the piece of work that sort of underpins it all. So, are we all in agreement that this goes forward to strategy as is, or otherwise? We could make that clear as a vote.
Well, you've heard my views, Chair, on the actual thing itself, and I think I'm right, and Councillor Ritchie thinks he's right, and so does everybody else.
I think you've got to.
I can guarantee you nobody will ever answer that question.
Yeah, can I just say that this report, what we're doing here is putting a report forward for the strategy group to actually look at and decide on.
Right.
That's what we're doing here, not actually deciding on the merits of climate change or being climate change. What we're saying is there's a piece of work here that is being put forward for consideration by the strategy group. If it gets through strategy group by the council, at which point it can be voted for or voted down at any one of those points going forward, what this does, it gives the council the opportunity to actually discuss it in full.
Just a quick question then before we say whether we think you should or shouldn't. Just clarification, if we do agree that it goes to strategy group and then strategy group turn it down, can you yourself then edit it and then put it back through? Or can it only be put through once to strategy group?
It can only be put through once, can't it? Can you?
I think, Chairman, it would be a matter for this committee to consider what strategy group and council had to say about it. So I think if it was, hypothetically now, if it was to be rejected by strategy group and council, then you would expect to get some reasoning why it was rejected, and that may present something else to work on. I think if the council was minded to reject the report out of hand without offering an explanation, then it would be difficult to take it back. I think that's unlikely.
Yeah, in essence, the likelihood is that certain things will be cherry-picked or otherwise, or even added to is a possibility, isn't it? Is that a possibility?
Well, I think, Chairman, if I may, I think, I have exchanged some communication with Councillor Ritchie on behalf of the management team, and certainly in response to some of the recommendations, but also the number of the recommendations And it's not an issue with a number of recommendations per se, but there's a lot of work to be done to present a response to these recommendations to the strategy group to allow them to consider. And that really was the point I was trying to get across. But we have had some discussion in management team in anticipation that S&I were prepared to accept the recommendations in full, and we will give our best endeavours to get a report to strategy. But I think in terms of just understanding the pressure on that, the agenda for strategy group is due out a week tomorrow. So there's not a huge amount of time to
yeah, and I think we understand that as a committee here. We understand that it's a big ask. I still think with what you said and what Councillor Richardson says, there's possibilities in there to possibly group things and sort of almost put a proviso on that there's more work to be done going forward to another meeting, and I think that's the way. Would you agree that that's the way?
I think that's right. I mean, you know, we would understand if the officers were to tell the strategy group, look, we haven't completed our work on this. Can we put this back into the next cycle of meetings? If it was all put back to the next cycle of meetings, of course we would be anxious. But we recognise there are some things that I think the way that we've expressed it in the report is we're very happy if recommendations are passed, but recognising that many of these recommendations are that we will go and look at this, we will consider this, we will prepare proposals, rather than that we will immediately take action.
Can I ask a hypothetical question? If hypothetically there are sections of this report that caused some of the management team concerns, and those concerns were found their way to the members of the strategy group, such that those same members felt unable to agree the report in its entirety, but communicated that, say, were this section and this section to be put on the back burner, for want of a better expression. What's the procedure for that? In other words, could the rest of it be adopted, or would the whole thing have to go back while it was revised? And then, how does it work?
My response, yeah. I think, picking up from Councillor Ritchie's comments and which will hopefully answer the question from Councillor Frost. I think that the view of management team is, I won't personally be doing this work, so I can't actually give an assurance. But I suspect what will happen is that we will look at the sort of main themes coming from the report, and we will look to take something to strategy group that says the recommendation from S&I is we declare a climate emergency, for example, which seems to be a fundamental message coming across in the report. And I think, given that was the view of this committee, I seems to be arriving at that we're looking at a climate emergency. Then, thinking of the word emergency, it would be remiss to try and push the whole thing back. We need to get something, I think, to strategy group and to council which reflects the essence of the emergency. So I think possibly we can address that. Some of the more detailed stuff or the more challenging stuff that requires further research, we may be saying, and we would review this and report back to a future strategy group and council.
So when that happens, what options does strategy have at that point? Because it's got a situation where the management have said, the best work, because there are all these unknowns surrounding the workload with regards to certain points, because it's so unknown, we haven't sort of quantified the work and the resources and things that are available. What options does strategy have at that point? That's what I'm saying. Because can it pass it whilst there's these question marks hanging over the last thing, or is it not allowed to?
again, for you, Chairman, strategy group can do what the members of strategy group determine they wish to do, but it would be a recommendation from strategy group to council. Council ultimately would be making the decisions. So strategy group, hypothetically again, strategy group may say they agree wholeheartedly with the recommendations coming from S&I. They believe it's such a serious issue and it is an emergency, then let's push the whole thing through, regardless of the advice officers may be giving, which may be saying, hang on a minute, we might need to think about this a bit more, and we might need to think about the resources and the budget and how that comes, because there will be budgetary impacts on certainly some elements of this. And in fact, Councillor Ritchie's drawn attention to the appointment of a programme manager, I think, who's referred to, and consultants, and that's not just a decision that can be taken without understanding the financial implications of that.
And also remember that you can have input at the strategy group meeting as well. So if you have your preamble meeting, but you can also have your input as non-members at that strategy group meeting. You can vocalise those in front of the members of the strategy group, and then you can also, obviously, if it does, whatever goes through, you also have voting and speaking opportunities at the next council meeting on the document, on the proposals. So, there are various stages. Yes, there's points where this could be, you can lose parts of your, that's the democratic process going through, isn't it? That's how it works. We can't second guess strategy group members' decisions. What you can do as councillors is try and influence those by actually ensuring. There's nothing to stop you as authors of this report in actually sending this report to each individual councillor and asking them to read it. Whether they're going to go to strategy or not. You can press home your thoughts. You have got tools in your box to actually press this in the democratic process of this council, and that's how Councillor Ritchie things get decided and done, don't they? Ready for your question earlier. So
I think just one point of clarification there, Chairman, is in our council the presentation will be presumably from the environment portfolio holder rather than
sorry, what I was saying was that normally the chair lets you speak on the presentation.
I'm sure there will be opportunity
not to present it, and I'm sure the portfolio holder could use to actually ask questions even in the meeting, and things can be clarified from the floor. So that's all available.
I think it's been recommended to us that if we were planning to have a briefing meeting, then that briefing meeting should really be by decision of this committee.
I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good idea. It's a big report. I think it's something on every party's agenda. I think a cross-party piece of work. I think at least gives the opportunity for people to have their initial thoughts and same questions answered. I think it's a good idea. So that's a recommendation, isn't it? So
I think, Chairman, rather than add it as a recommendation to the report, if it's minuted as the desire of the committee, then we can accept that as something to take forward.
Are we agreed that is the desire of the committee, that there is an opportunity of a preamble meeting to discuss the findings?
Yeah.
And Chairman, can I just for clarity again, then am I right to assume that will be the members of the task panel will be presenting to members? Yeah.
All statutes.
The briefing.
And are you happy to organise, do they organise that through you, ref facilities?
We can make the arrangements for that, but I think you're looking at 5 o'clock on the day of the strategy group meeting, so we can make arrangements for that and get a note out. Well, in fact, probably the better if the note comes from you as chair of S&I, or we can draft something for you.
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah. Right. And obviously, this is the report that's presented, but if you've got any other information that you want to bring on, do I need to make that available sure it's...
The report is available publicly, but we could send a copy, electronic copy or a link or something to make sure members can find it.
Okay, thank you. That's excellent. Okay. So we're putting forward this, the recommendations of this report and the report to the strategy group. Everyone's agreed on that, yeah, just to be clear.
Yes, surprisingly. I agree with that.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie, and thank you, Councillor Frost, and thank you all for help us and contributed to this work at this stage, and let's hope something can be on it. The next one is the assignment 32, which was handed to Councillor Harrington Carter from Councillor Amy Howard. So if there's anything on that, or your plans for actually actioning it with Councillor Howard to take it on and
Yes, we've received most of the documents from Councillor Amy Howard, but of course with the general election she has been under it completely, so I understand I've not got absolutely everything yet. We have had a meeting over what she did and what we think I should do. So what we've done so far is communications with the neighbouring councils to find out what they do, what their policies are, how they go forth about a youth council sort of thing. And then what I've been looking at recently is setting up meetings with youth groups and clubs around Daventry district to find out if they think that there will be interests, as they spend pretty much most of their days working with young people, and finding out if they think there is an interest for this, and maybe some ideas of how we could go about setting it up, but also publicising it when it is set up.
Okay, so you're happy that you can take that forward, and you're happy you can bring something back to the next meeting?
Yeah.
And as for Councillor Frost, what we really need is, what we really need is deadlines on these as well, so some sort of commitment to finishing and plan and a complete plan of action on that so we can actually tell the strategy group and they can expect to receive something from us so we can get into the planned sort of thought processes and programme. And it is important we keep our programmes going in this committee. It's part of what we do, and we do need to keep them going. So if you could really grasp the nettle on that one and come back with something substantive for us to look at next time, hopefully some sort of draft would be good, but at least a little bit more update on what you've done and the plan of action going forward. Have you got any questions of anyone here on how to do that? I mean, you're aware that you can help in directing.
I've got no questions at the moment.
If you're stuck with where to go, then we're all here to help as well, and hopefully Councillor Howard can help on that as well. So keep badgering her and get as much answer as you possibly can. The next one, assignment 33, which was engagement with minorities. That was my report, and that is presented to you in this pack. So hopefully you'll have read that as well. There's 3 recommendations on the report, which I've come up with. The DVC website is enhanced with a foreign language assistance page covering the main immigrant nationalities found in the area. The DVC website assistance page to be publicised in the immigrant community, and assistance in translation be sought from sources such as community groups and staff members. That is to help. In going through this engagement with our minority communities, particularly I was particularly looking at elections, but it does pertain to almost everything. There is a strategy in that there is a work, if you see the appendix, it's actually all there in the plan, and the Electoral Commission actually provides a lot of pieces of work on this aspect of community life and engagement. And we as a council do it. We do actually do it. But my feeling was we could just do a little bit more. Now, obviously, the people in these communities very often, for instance, they couldn't have been included in the last general election. So what we're really talking about here is local council elections. Obviously, we no longer have European elections, which they could also partake in. But it does give us opportunities to actually engage these groups at every level. And the view is out there in the world that if people don't think that they're democratically represented and their views aren't democratically put forward and understood and taken account of, then what they do is they do not engage in any aspect of the community. In terms of like stay in small enclaves and do what they do. They generally feel excluded from everything. So if the council can play a really, really important part here in actually just making people feel part of the central hub of how they are looked after in terms of the services. The services we provide in this council, doing things on their everyday lives, we're part of it. We're consultees on many aspects of the other aspects of their life, on the medical side of things. And if we can get these people engaged in our council, actually voting for us, or not voting for us as councillors, then I think that we're a long way forward. And I think it's a real initial step to actually make people feel wanted and included and part of our community. From what I get in discussions with people like that, I did speak to some people in the Lithuanian, Polish and Slovakian communities. But, you know, they like living here. They genuinely feel that it's a decent place to live, but they don't know how it all works. It's as simple as that. So I do ask you to take all my recommendations and ask us to do a little bit more. Councillor Rich.
Yeah, I certainly support the recommendations. I think that what you just said is actually much more important than a lot of what is in the report. That the act of voting, the importance of the act of voting, is the sort of recognition that you're part of the community, that you have got a stake in the community. And very often, I mean, the research is that's actually fairly well down the line of engagement by people who come from outside, Britain before they actually reach that stage. I don't know if the staff of our elections office go through some of the marked registers just to try to map out. I mean, they can't do everything, but we know the people who have come from Eastern Europe, the people who have got various letters attached to their name from depending on the elections that they've been voted, and find what the turnouts were. I have, not for the last couple of years, in the past sort of done it for parts of Daventry, where the turnout amongst people from other European Union countries living here, turnouts were something of the order of 2%. And of course that's a huge overestimate of the turnout, because so many of them simply have never got around to registering to vote. I mean, I thought, so as I said, I hope that President Staincher needs to lead on. If we were a much, if we bigger, more established ethnic communities within Daventry, we would no doubt have developed structures over the years. These communities would have developed their structures that help to provide them with representation, as happens around places around the Asian communities around Birmingham and so on. These things start. There are areas in London where, yes, you have the Polish communities that are actually there getting together to be involved in British politics. There are these things that sort of happen elsewhere, I can sense what we can actually do, because it means that people who are from, who are not part of the indigenous community here, they're less likely to be in a position where they're going to have support from within their people with their own background, of their own language, of their own culture. And whether there's more we can do. I mean, I know that there's an organisation in Northampton, the name of which escapes me, to which some councils are affiliated. Daventry is not. I won't say more. These meetings are recorded. But there needs to be some thing about how we can. Yes, at the end of the day, it would be nice to be able to measure just how many people were registering to vote and actually voting when they got the chance to vote. But it's the extent to which we see that people are accepting things in Daventry and being accepted by Daventry. Community relations has got to be two-sided stew. And I just feel that this is something that, while I think that your report is great, there is something that still needs to be on the agenda.
Okay. Well, we can take that forward.
Can I apologise for having said that? I'm expected, having suggested to a group of residents that they hold a meeting, an emergency meeting, we would choose to hold one this evening.
Has anyone else got anything to ask, or can we agree that it goes forward as is?
Very good.
That's agreed then? Thank you. So you don't think it'll be over, Councillor Ritchie?
Well, an awful lot of very angry people that will all want to talk. If anybody knows anything about what's happening.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
It's the implementation activities.
Oh, yeah, implementation
activities. The action plans.
Okay, so we go through them.
So we're looking at page 85 of papers, which is assignment 19 of the needs of fitness and wellbeing being met in rural areas. The action plan's there, and there's still one action outstanding in relation to Leisure Centre East. There is some text there which explains the work that's going on with Malton College to deliver that facility, and we're expecting that to be done within this calendar year. So whilst not there yet, progress is being made. Moving on to assignment 20, investigation into cooperation between DDC, Parish Town Council and major planning applications. Again, there's just one action outstanding, which is action 4, which is the local plan, and we're very nearly there.
Yeah, that's going to
is the local plan goes to strategy group in February and then on to council. So within touch induced.
Is this where we're going to actually restart notifying them of applications?
I'm not sure of the exact detail of what was...
It was just that I was asked about this in my parish council meeting. They were complaining, the parish council, that they weren't receiving notifications of planning applications anymore. And I don't know whether they ever did receive notification of applications.
It's my understanding that they do, and it wouldn't need restarting, and that happens a matter of course.
Okay.
But this action is specifically around the approval of the local plan.
Right.
Yeah, if you're not getting notifications, you need to take that on the retainer, don't you? You need to take that on the retainer.
I think they are supposed to get them, and they've just hasn't been done for a number of occasions, that's all.
Okay, then moving on then to page 91 and assignment 26, which is parking in Daventry Estates. So work is ongoing on 2 of the 3, sorry, it's 5 on the page, 2 of the 5, and the other 3 are shown as complete. Some narrative there to explain.
Yeah, okay. Any questions on that? Or
Can I just ask what JAG and TRO stands for?
Right, yes. Sorry, it's jargon and we shouldn't be including in this. JAG is a joint action group.
Yep.
And TRO is a traffic something order.
Regulation.
Traffic regulation order, thank you.
Thank you.
Super educated now.
That's it.
I forgot what TRO was as well.
When you answer the question.
Then on to page 93, which is assignment 28, which is the sale of T-Deco properties in Middlemore. That is now complete. Members, I'm sure, will recall expressing their displeasure that Action 3 hadn't been completed at the last meeting. It now has, so that action is
Excellent news.
And T-Decal stands for?
T-Decal is the Daventry Estate Company Limited.
Which is now gone.
No, it is still in
Still
existence.
extant.
These are houses that the council owns for rent. So commercial properties. Commercial properties, not.
No, the residential property.
Some of wait a minute, I mean commercially, not.
It's a commercial venture for residential properties.
Yes, yes.
Not council houses.
So that's part of the problem. They are council houses, but not council houses.
Yes, I think that did get explained to me.
Then on to page 95, assignment 29, which is review of DDC anti-social behaviour strategy. There's no change from what was reported last time. Action 1 is still to be delivered, but work has commenced on that, and we're expecting that to complete in April.
Okay, that's good. That's all of them.
Yes, Chairman.
One-year post-implementation activity reviews, assignment 16, customer satisfaction, low response rate to surveys. So this is the, we need to put something in place to actually just basically report back to see, to ensure that this has been done and is ongoing. It's pretty much an exercise. I'd quite like to do assignment 16 myself, because I did put it in place many moons ago. Well, obviously not that many moons ago, so I'll have a look at that one. And then assignment 23, scrutiny. There's not really much to do on that, is there?
No, Chairman, there was one single recommendation agreed by Council, which was to increase the number of meetings from 5 to 6 per annum, and that was done, it's added to the calendar, so it's a simple acknowledgement.
Yes, simple acknowledgement. So I'll do that one as chair as well. So I'll take those two on. Our next task, people, and this is an important one, and I do ask you to take consideration on this, is future task plans, because Councillor Rich is going to be possibly free of task plans, but maybe carrying on. Councillor Robertson hasn't got one, and I'm not doing one at the moment. So there are 3 members of this committee that aren't doing it.
I do have a suggestion, Chair. Whether or not it'll go down very well, or whether or not it's appropriate to do it at this point in Daventry District Council's history, i.e. it's mine. I don't know. But I don't know what it is. And it's the political and democratic efficacy of the way we implement delegated authority to officers to refuse. And I'm talking specifically about planning permission here, but there are other areas as well, including environmental health, etc. The reason it came about is because I've had several complaints about matters being decided undemocratically. Nearly always from people who had their applications refused, of course, and we ought to be able to do it better. And so I think it's worth doing. Whether it's worth doing at this point in time in the council, as I say, in the council's history of about to disappear. Well, not history, but I don't know.
I'll just get a view.
Well, I wasn't actually going to give a view on the sense of carrying out the task panel or not, but just to clarify that the authority to refuse planning applications or other applications is set out in the council's constitution, so it is properly delegated by councillors to officers, so therefore it is not undemocratic.
Well, that's nice of you should say that, but I still think that perhaps we could make it appear more democratic to the populace.
So, Councillor, what you're really thinking about is to review the process,
yes,
and make it clearer. Is that
well? Yeah,
Chairman, sorry, we talk about delegated.
Delegated authority to refuse. Nobody complains about delegated authority when it's actually approved, because nobody complains about being approved, do they?
Well, people do, yes.
Well, do they?
Yes, they don't.
Only the conditions thereof, not
normally the applicant, but
oh well, yes, fair enough. But that's
But it does cut both ways, if you see what
I suppose it does. But actually, I hadn't thought of that. But you're quite right about that. Perhaps we should make a vote if we're going to do it at all.
But it's looking at
delegated authority. Delegated authority, basically the way we implement delegated authority. And can we do it any better?
Okay, are we minded to accept that as a task panel?
I think so. Excellent point. Can I ask? It's got me thinking. There are specific thresholds, aren't there, beyond which that things can't be delegated. In simple terms, if you own a listed property and you wanted it painted a slightly different shade of brown, say, unless you have been in a situation where I found myself in, but when you're an elected member, that kind of thing gets delegated. Simply if you want to build sort of 50 houses in a paddock somewhere, that can't be delegated. Is there somewhere I can download? Is there a rule sheet that can be downloaded? There is, I thought so.
Yes, Chairman, through you, there is a list of delegations within the Council's constitution.
You mean there's a criteria of delegation?
Well, it's more than criteria, because it's not necessarily just about thresholds. So there is a list of what can be delegated and what will be dealt with by committee in planning terms.
So to deal with Robertson's point, yeah. May I suggest that?
I'll ask you where it is later.
Because that's where our power lies, I would suggest. Because if we feel that, if we share the view that there's something a bit undemocratic here, then we are allowed to tweak.
Yes, Councillor Frost, I think what you're doing is you're almost preempting the report.
We are, that's quite true. I'm just thinking that myself.
So
we're writing it for me.
So you're making valid points, absolute valid points, but that's what we're asking Councillor Robertson to look at.
Oh.
That's precisely what
Well, Councillor Robertson was doing the asking, but anyway, I'm just...
that's what he's going to be. That's what he needs to be looking at to ascertain whether you think things could be done a little bit better, done slightly differently, and come up with any recommendations, or otherwise around the delegated decisions process.
We just get the feeling, you see, that it's quite an in-depth thing and wants quite sophisticated handling. Is it going to be? I can't rush it, and you haven't got much time left in this authority. So
I'm more than happy that this committee has to be working on projects. So yes, I think you should take it on, and I think you should take it on vigorously and aim to do it as quickly as possible. So if you could come back with a scoping document on that for us at the next meeting.
yeah, I can certainly do that. When is that meeting done?
Preempt that with any work. There's nothing to stop you actually doing some preemptive work on that in advance of it to fill in that document.
I think, if I may, Chairman, I think if it's a fairly focused piece of work, then that should enable it to be done reasonably quickly, and also for Strategy Group and Council to consider any recommendations that come from it. And if there was proposals to change the scheme of delegation, then Council can deal with that, and the new rule will apply from a Council decision.
Yeah.
So we have 14 months of life still.
Yeah.
So please, so if you could.
Right, well, I'll certainly get a scoping document together, but I do require some help writing it, so, well, no, you could.
I was just trying to figure out what I mean, reach with the bullet.
This can, remember members, this can go out, you can actually try and second any other member to do this, or any other help. You've also got the help of the officers when you, in terms of knowledge, understanding and possibilities. So it's up to you really to actually get that assistance from other councillors. I mean, if you've been approached by other councillors as well, if there's other members that have got certain views on this, then
there is no doubt of that. But I don't want to make this thing personal. But also I have another minor problem, which is a technical problem, insofar as my system that I use is Google. This council uses Word. They're not compatible really. So do something about it.
I do think a Google Doc does convert to a Word doc.
But not exactly very well. I think we had this problem with my last assignment.
I think, Chairman, that if you're used to operating in Google, if you can send us through what you've got, we'll either convert it or we'll retype it.
It doesn't completely format it, it should format mostly. It should mostly format that.
And certainly in terms of, as the Chairman's suggested, if you want some assistance with the scoping document, if you can set out generally what you're trying to achieve, then certainly we can help with the presentation of that scoping document. We won't, it's for you to determine where you want to go. We certainly wouldn't want to try and lead you in wherever you want to go.
I'm just worried about getting the scoping document. The last time I tried, I couldn't even get that because it didn't download properly. For some reason, I don't know why, I'm no longer technically competent.
I can help with that. If you send it to me, I'll convert it. Just whiz over to me, I'll get it back.
So is that okay? We've got that going forward. Is there any other suggestions? Because it's always good to have them we can even have some pending as well. So if you could continue to think of them. I mean, I was sort of thinking, not along the same lines, but I was also thinking maybe, I've heard a few sort of grizzles or questions about our enforcement policies as well, which sort of came out of today's presentation really, in as much as we put things out there, we license people, and it's like how do we look after it? I think there's been some questions about planning enforcement as well. So if everyone's got any thoughts on that going forward as a possibility.
Yeah, that is a fair point. As with all these things, it's a communication thing, isn't it? It's just our lives would make it easier as elected members if there's more sort of transparency and people knew where they were. With regards to when there's, as you say, grizzles around noise disturbance or something like that.
Remember, this committee's here is scrutiny and improvement, so it's to look at what we do and can we improve things at all. So it's ideas around that. Yes, we might think that we do things quite well, but it doesn't mean we can't do them. We can't look at them and do them better. So precluding things that we do well isn't necessarily a point. So it's almost anything that we do, but primarily, of course, it's normally things that there's a perception where it's not going quite as well as it should on the basis of the handbrake don't fix it. There's a little bit of that, but I pick up things, some apprehension around enforcement. So maybe we should be having a little thought around that as a committee and looking at getting that as a task panel for the next one that goes through.
And I think, Chairman, all I would suggest is if you sort of focus on a specific service area rather than enforcement generally, because policies will vary from service to service. So
that's what I'm sort of putting out so thought for. Just a rolling. I mean, can we have it mentioned that we've got to think about enforcement? I think that's as enforcement policies around.
Well, do you want that as a separate suggestion?
We'll just sort of say that as going forward, and then because we can develop this moving on. As one drops in, another one drops out.
The officers have done quite a bit of work on enforcement locally, I believe. Am I right about that? Because it was perceived at one time that our enforcement policies were, reword that we were not very strong when it came to enforcement.
That's part of the reason.
Yeah.
So we're okay with that?
I'm not aware of any specific work, but it's not my area.
Not your area.
And again, it would vary from service area to service areas. We enforce on a lot of different functions.
I don't think we had an enforcement officer for quite some time, and I think we do now. I think that's one of the issues.
Are you referring to planning enforcement?
No, it's a shared thing. I think it's shared, both planning and the environmental health share the same enforcement system. Am I wrong? No, there you go. I'm wrong again.
Okay, so that's going to be thinking about. But carry on thinking about anything that comes up that you think, and thank you for yours today.
I just quickly ask a question on that point. There's a different with planning enforcement also to environmental health. What about licensing? So someone's breaching licensing. Is there a separate one for that as well?
No, the police do that. Am I right?
Do they?
The police, it depends on what the issue is, and I think they touched on it earlier with the presentation that environmental health have a role. If it's a noise issue around a licensed premise, then environmental health would get involved. If it was a public nuisance, then the police would be likely to deal. Certainly, if it's a public order issue, the police would be involved. But environmental health would have a role there. Potentially, but environmental health enforce on other issues as well. So it's thinking of an example, housing issues and environmental health do some enforcement work on housing multiple occupation, for example. So there are a number of different enforcement functions. So I think if the committee are minded to look at enforcement, well, arguably you could look at generally at the council's enforcement policies, but if you've got specific concerns about environmental health or planning, then probably you want to focus on that. Useful.
Okay, so if we're agreed on that, that's fine. And then of course we have our normal presentation from portfolio holders to sort of hold them to account where possible. So it's who we want to see next. Obviously we had licensing today, so it's where we want to go next. Obviously these things come around. Has anyone got any particularly strong views on that? Who we see, who would like to hear from?
Who else have you seen recently? Of course, this is my first. I don't want to say bring someone in and if you saw them.
Well, it's quite permissible to get them back in and update it. I think the last one was Councillor Auger, wasn't it?
Yes, Councillor Hawley came in as the new leader.
That's a new leader.
We haven't had Stephen Osborne for a very long time, have we?
On planning? Well, yeah, we don't think we've seen him. That's if, of course, that's if we want to. No.
I'd like to see him here.
Yeah.
Although I don't know whether it's appropriate or not, because I think it is, isn't it?
I agree with that. Planning seems.
I think, Chairman, just to sort of note of caution is that certainly within planning policies and the process, that's fine, but to get into individual planning cases is outside the scope of this committee.
No,
I agree with that.
Yeah, we're thinking more about our sort of our general record, which is quite good, but it's just.
It has been. We've been losing a few appeals lately.
Yeah. So
And potentially linking with your last action about, you might want to quiz him about planning and boards.
So if we could, I'll ask Councillor Osborne if he can attend our next meeting then. If he can't, as a backup, I was thinking, we haven't seen Councillor Howard for a little while. We've got quite a lot of things, there's quite a lot of things going. We are doing quite a lot of things at the moment. It's just about his, really to understand his plans for promotion and of the district and the town in particular. We've got the cinema coming along, and we've got the new leisure centre, haven't we, etc. So I think it'd be quite interesting to understand where we're going and how he sees putting Daventry forward in the new regime in 14 months' time. So I'd quite like to see him do that. That's the backup. So if you can't do it this time, have him phone. So I'll ask Councillor Osborne and Nick, and then maybe have to swap them over. That's everybody. Agreed?
Good. Pretty lovely more people there. Seven times,
They're all here. Oh, we were until Councillor Ritchie went.
It's just a massive room.
That's
It
what
really looks less because we're in a little room.
it's a small internet gathering, isn't it?
Exclusive.
Exclusive. Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, let's call it that.
Are we there? There's no urgent business or anything, is there? Any urgent business that's come up?
Not advised, Chairman.
Okay, people.